we'll start anyway. Rajni, you are the one only who joined. So until others get in, we'll start because since the Tarukaya, very good morning. So since that we are kind of short of time, so I'll go through a couple of again selected question. So this is basically on the microfinancing. The previous question that you can read through. This is the 2018 March paper. It says microfinancing is the main delivery method of development financing in many developing countries through financial inclusion and financial literacy. There are many global organizations are available to provide funding for microfinancing in developed countries. Basically, when it comes to the microfinancing, I think we have discussed in detail during the class also. There are several areas that you need to know. So what are those areas? Like they might answer questions of, say, definitions of microfinancing, target group, objectives, microfinancing institutions, issues faced by the microfinance institutions and the micro entrepreneurs, type of the products or could accommodate under microfinancing, like micro loans, micro savings, micro remittances kind of thing, and microfinancing act, right? And then the issues like what are the what do you call the what are the microfinancing models, right? So there may be 7 or 8 areas that one has to be compatible with, right? I think I have given all those things under the section 3 when we are discussing that. So go through that as well. Maybe my presentation covers everything, and the note I have given is also everything. What I wanted to tell you is, like, this is again very easy question. This could be one of the first questions that you can start when you attempt in the paper, because to that it is easy, because nothing new comes if you see last 5-6 papers. So basically you should not drop this question, and you have enough time also to prepare that. You need not to go through any extra notes, right? So since that past papers, every time or at least every twice in sessions we have been given a question, so you can go through that the past paper questions and my reading material and my presentation. So will that cover everything? So actually last time also that they have asked the definition for that, which is again the recent definition that is in the last year paper as well. So I think everything has been covered. I haven't seen anything new coming from what has been so far given. Only thing is there may be repeat questions for this microfinancing section. So that's all about kind of some input to the microfinancing. Then part 1, they are asking about what are the objectives of microfinancing and target group. So there are a couple of objectives here. Now in our presentations also, it talks about one thing is basically this it's another method of giving funds to the entrepreneurs who needs the startup capital, who needs the financing. That's the first thing. But remember, when we are trying to give the financing, there are some other benefits also coming, like not only the financial benefit, non-financial benefits also coming with this type of financing, like women empowerment, increase in the standard of living, right? Increase in the financial literacy. So you make these micro entrepreneurs in the country's economic growth contribution are some of other objectives also, right? Not only provision of financing, there are some other options like other objectives as well, right? So this is very common question. So what you can do is like maybe list out 3 or 4 objectives and memorize it. So there may be highly likelihood in a given scenario, the examiner could ask about, let's say, the definition, objectives, target group, kind of things could be asked. So this question basically asks about the objective. Then the part 2 of that same question is, what is the target group? The target group could be unbankable poor, low income household, and the micro enterprise. So it basically talks about entrepreneurs and enterprises, right? two segments, individuals as well as the entities, but they should be within the microfinancing definitions. That's one. And the other one is they should be low income. That's very important because they they are unable to make a kind of bigger impact in terms of generating income. Hence we call them low income or maybe poor, poverty stricken. So there may be a couple of words you can use: low income individuals, low income entities, and unbankable. Because now if you take a small medium type of customer, so they can go to a bank, they can go to a financial institute and get the money because they can show their credit worthiness, track record, repayment capacity, collateral availability, and everything could be there. Even the soft skills like financial skills, right, non-financial skills could be shown to the bankers. But in this scenario, this unbankable or the poverty stricken or the poor people cannot show their bankability. So hence that we call unbankable poor low income households and the micro enterprises. So it's a one kind of target group. If you go to my definitions also, there may be similar one, but either way try to make a kind of a very good answer on who is our target group, who is the objectives, what are the objectives, and kind of what is microfinancing, the definitions which we have described: what is micro, what is finance, and when you come to the finance, what is direct like micro savings, micro loans and remittances, and non-financials like soft skills area that we have discussed. There is a kind of the slides to support that also, but what I wanted to tell you is like since this is very easy questions, do your max in order to get everything done. Right. In part 2, again, this has been asked for MCQs as well as in a essay type of questions, financial inclusion. So this is again very important that you can remember this definition, because this has again been tested several times. So if you go through this definition, there are a couple of areas that we can have a focus, right? What are those? Process of ensuring access to appropriate financial products and services. So that's basically one is access to products and services, right? That's accommodation, granting, right? So access to, providing access to products, that's one. Then who? Vulnerable groups such as weaker sections and low income groups like poverty stricken, low income group, or micro entrepreneurs, micro entities. That's a part 2. Vulnerable groups, which describe who are they. Number 2. Then third is affordable cost in a fair and transparent manner. There's a third point also. So financial inclusion is 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 points within this definition. Third one is affordable cost. It should be fair and transparent and affordable also. Like you can't price it at very high, though that some institutions are doing, right? But it should be affordable to these people and transparent also. Because now if you're not transparent enough, then what happened is very difficult to people to get it consumed, get it used, right? So the last one is who basically does this? Financial institution, by mainstream financial institution. That includes banks, non-banks, like cooperative societies type of the financial other providers like that. So basically financial inclusion, 4 areas, that is the provision, access to there should be access to appropriate financial products and services, vulnerable groups, affordable cost and transparent manner, and financial institution. There are 4 key components in this financial inclusion definition. So you need to be thorough with, be aware with, be comfortable with, and same to be memorized, because same thing could be repeated at any time. So I have seen a couple of occasions, some in case study, some in MCQ questions. Okay. We move to the third part. How the microfinancing institution differ from, that's again one of the things that we have discussed in the class. microfinancing institutions and conventional banks. So there are some, banks and financial institutions, and versus the microfinancing institutions, MFIs, right? What's the difference between? And if you think about, so maybe a bank like, a well-established, say maybe commercial bank or government bank, and think how they're doing the business. And also think about like Sarvodaya, or maybe like cooperative societies, or maybe microfinancing institutions who basically mainly focus on microfinancing institutions. So then try to, come up with some points. What's the like differences? That is the question that examiner is asking from us. Assess entrepreneurial skills of the poor, right? So generally in microfinancing institutions, what does they do? They will assess skill of the poor, because because obviously they don't have enough capital, no, or maybe zero capital in terms of financing, no commitment, no obligation, because they don't have. As an institution, what you should do is, but you should comfortable enough these people having financial skill, entrepreneurial skill, business skills. So if not, what could happen is they are unable to, you know run the sort of business, run the, the particular venture with the support of microfinancing institution. So that's why, if you remember correct, so there are several microfinancing models we have been learned, we have been discussed, right? So we have discussed basically. So there are some from the initial methods. Actually, we try to provide smaller amount, and we try to develop, to inculcate the financial or the entrepreneurial skills within the entrepreneur. So that's the first one. Provide basic financial literacy knowledge, that not only the financing, non-financial skills, how to do bookkeeping, how to maintain cash book, how to, start bit of sort of data management, how to do savings, right? It's like financial literacy. Sometimes they don't know. They don't know what is working capital. Whether if I am getting everything as a turnover could be my profit. That's what their initial thinking. But you should tell them, no, this is the turnover. There are some, expenses involved in purchasing, expenses involved in managing this purchasing, expenses involved in paying kind of, some debts kind of thing. Then you have some profits goal, and then it's a recorded profit. It's not the cash flow, because there's a timing of cash flows. Like, so those are some initial information that you should provide these clients. Then only they learn, right? Profit is not always cash flows, turnover is not always profit. So that is important. First, provide small loans suitable to identified persons, and then introduce savings with the institutions, right? So here it's a like, the way that, how you approach these clients, but not basically the conventional banks. When you come to the conventional banks, probably they may not go to that detail, because they know these clients are a bit of established. Then you start a fresh, a kind of, giving a loan, granting a loan, and recovering and monitoring kind of, because they know that, they are good at financial skills, and they don't need kind of sort of that input. But in microfinancing companies, they know that, these entrepreneurs and enterprises, they need bit of the skill. So that's why they say smaller loan, and then you will increase, escalate, a little by little, and then you introduce savings with the institutions. Higher interest rates to accept high risk of lending to the poor. So that's something, higher interest rates to accept high risk of lending, right? So then probably not like, the general lenders, general clients, these clients probably might have higher risk. Why? No skills, no capital, no collateral, lack of financial literacy, right? And then basically they don't know how to manage the cash kind of thing. So there is a risky when you financing these type of clients. So then effectively, so your interest rates are a bit higher compared to well-established clients. So basically, a non-profit organization, maybe NGOs, are engaged in this type of lending. So basically, this talks about the difference between financial, like conventional banks versus the microfinancing institutions. That's again very common and very easy questions we can get, and we have got it earlier also, right? Then last one, what is necessary for microfinancing institutions to provide financial literacy, right? So this is very good question, because now when you talk about funding, all other banks like established SME client, they are not very much interested in providing financial literacy. Why? We presume they have it, they own it, they are good at that point. Or you need to do fine tuning, because they have something and then you do fine tuning. But in terms of this microfinancing clients, you need to give it from upfront, give it from the scratch, because they don't know. Then the question is why you need to provide that. Like we talk financial inclusion, financial discipline, financial literacy, financial knowledge. So many things like soft skills on financing, soft skills on entrepreneurship. So why we need to give? That's a kind of a question. Step for clients towards financial inclusion, right? Very good point. Because that's a small step, maybe the first step, or maybe the one of the steps towards the financial inclusion. Remember, financial inclusion is provision product and services by financial institution holders in an affordable and transparent manner, right? And what is the other one is targeting low income group. So that's like basically financial inclusion definition is. And here, so one of the steps, because if you provide these soft skills, entrepreneurial skills to this client, one day you can bring them to this financial inclusion exercise. Number two, move away SME sector from money lenders, right? If you are not doing this, if you are not providing them adequate knowledge at the inception, then these customers become small, medium enterprises. Then they don't know the difference between the money lender versus the proper bank. Sometimes they think about, efficiency of getting the funding. They are not thinking about further on that, about, what could happen, what could go wrong. So nothing would be, uh, taken into account when you are taking a particular financing decision. So move away SME sector from money lenders is another kind of, the requirement in these microfinancing institutions about this the financial literacy. Sell their products easily. What is that? Because when you provide these financial literacy skills, so then they know what are the markets, what is the pricing techniques, how should I do the costing, how I'm managing my financing, right? So then they can effectively go to a particular market rather than sell it to maybe nearby, maybe a vendor or the dalal in a particular area. You can see through maybe internet banking sometimes, through e-commerce kind of thing. So you can do so many other things, because if you know this, right? Maybe the IT skills to financial skills to marketing skills. So everything is a part of this financial literacy package. Then you know how to capture the customers. Sometimes even you can, provide export orders also if you are kind of a good enough with the IT. Rather than, depending on one or two buyers, then you have a better market. Healthy deposit and loan portfolio. That's also important when you are training these people about savings habit, maybe credit worthiness, upfront payment, or regular payments. So this is important. So it is good for financial institutions to maintain the proper portfolio as well as the sort of a deposit base. Reduce NPAs. So you will be able to reduce the non-performing advances, NPA levels, right? Reduce NPA levels. Last one, use technology to minimize the administrative cost of the MFIs. What is that? Microfinance institutions has to incur very high cost on this managing this client relationship. But if they are not very much financial savvy, they are very good at financial to managing or say attending financial norms could be issue for the provider. Why? Let's say if they are not knowing what is script, what is the regular payment, about the savings, having savings build up, maintaining bookkeeping, managing debtors kind of thing, so could have some issue, right? So then by doing so, so you can managing those NPA, because most of those, the clients, they are doing very well, then the clients are not going to the non-performing segment. Last one, technology to minimize, administer cost of MFIs. That's again very important part, where, because now if the clients are very much good with this new technology, like smart card to credit card to internet banking to ATM, right? So then very easy, right? So you need not to have the people on the what do you call uh, field to consult with client, get payments collected, maybe follow up kind of payments. Why you need not? Because now everything has been automated, linked with technology. So probably maybe GPS could be used to track how they doing the businesses kind of. Smart card could be used to as an intermediary support the payments like that. So those are some of the the things that we could do if we support them to upskill their literacy skills, right? So that's a question that under the microfinancing, right? This is like why I selected this question is because this covers most of the areas in microfinancing um, question. The earlier one, there is another question that you can read through, which is one of the very focused area about Microfinancing Act and the kind of some institutions in Sri Lanka, history of microfinancing. So you can read through the 2018 September paper question just about this. But this is more or less a microfinancing like core question that we could get. So what I wanted to highlight is there are highly likelihood that their microfinancing question could be on our paper. So every time we see like exam weightage may be less than 10% because only one area that we are focusing, but we see some questions. Also, it could be reflected in the MCQ paper also. If you remember correct, last time they have asked about the definition for the microfinancing, one of the MCQ questions. So like maybe above below 16 million or less than 10 employees kind of thing. So they have asked a kind of a question also. So remember the importance of this question, right? So I mean, very easy to follow, and I have given you whatever presentation and reading material and like some of the MCQ questions that you need to follow and refer, so that once you do everything, so you are in a better situation to address that kind of a question, right? Any gray area on this type of question? Any gray area? Right. So hope I think this could be easily tackled. So let's move to some the other areas, right? Right. Now we move to the second area, the area that's break-even, working capital, and investment financing. So let's give a try on this. So I think this type of a question, I think I'm not sure that we have done this class, but take a couple of minutes among you and see whether you can have the kind of answer. Just sketch it and come with the answer, and then we will discuss. This is 2017 September, Q2. take a couple of minutes and see whether you can compute this. Break even. Remember, we were talking about contribution to sales, right? Contribution per unit divided by selling price per unit. Is it the method? So PV ratio, yeah, very good. Samindri, 0.2. How we got the 0.2 is PV ratio is equal to contribution divided by sales price. So what is the contribution here? Selling price is 100, variable cost is 80, 100 minus 80 is 20 is the contribution per unit. Selling price is 100, 20 divided by 100 is 0.2. So you can get 5 marks if you know that. Good. What is the break even? Part 2. If anybody has some question on that, please let me know. If not, we can go to the part 2. Break even point in terms of output, in terms of sales value. How are we going to compute the break even point? What is the equation? And based on the equations, we can compute the output in terms of unit and in terms of sales value. Please start. Who has completed? As I told you on the other day, you need a bit of conversion with this, since that I have asked you to go through the particular questions and the areas before starting the kind of a session, because otherwise the effectiveness of the sessions will not be at great. So you need to know at least what are the equations kind of thing also, because otherwise very difficult to catch up, because you don't have much time. Later you can do it, but at least you know what is the kind of break-even equation. Can anybody set the answer?
Fixed cost divided by contribution
per unit. Very good, Rachini. So what is the fixed cost here? Yes, I mean 250 units. It's correct. Rachini, what's the fixed cost here?
5,000.
5,000 divided by 20, right?
20.
Simple. So 250 is the unit. Then what's the rupee value? 250 into 100. Right? 250 into 100. Thanks, Amindri. It's correct. So 250 is the unit into 100 is the selling price. So 250,000. Fine. So anybody having issues on this? Padmendra, Prashanta, Taruka,
No,
Shashika?
sir.
Fine?
Yeah.
Great. If anything, please let me know, because this, I mean, we may not be able to, do it again, right? This is the last chance that we are doing this, last occasion. Then go to the third one, profit. When, in case if you provide 20,000 gift packs, there are two methods that you can compute this. I think we have learned the equation where when the target profit is given, what is the equation? Q units is equal to fixed cost plus target profit divided by contribution per unit. That is the equation. Where Q units is equal to fixed cost plus target profit divided by contribution per unit. Out of that equation, you know Q, you know fixed cost, you know contribution per unit. We have been asked to compute TP, target profit. See whether that you can get the answer. Anybody got the answer? TP, yes, 39500. What about rest? Any difficulty? What is the equation I was telling? Q is equal to, just hold on. Give me a minute, please. Very sorry, excuse on that. So what could be the answer there? Samin has got the answer. Anybody else?
Yes, the same answer.
Same answer. Yeah, you can calculate Padmendra in two ways, but the easiest method is where Q, right? The quantity is equal to fixed cost plus TP divided by contribution per unit. That's the easiest method. So you just substitute those numbers given, and then you will be getting the answer, right? If you see the suggested answers also, there will be another method that they will give. Basically, this is the PV ratio. Contribution divided by selling price, that is 20 divided by 100 is 20%, right? So contribution per unit is selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. And then break-even point is fixed cost divided by contribution. That is 4,000 plus 1,000, 5,000 divided by 20, 250 units. Then this is the another method that we can compute, where you can go to the direct method: sales, variable cost, fixed cost, total cost, profits. That's a normal equation, right? We can compute that. The other one is the equation which I mentioned you. That's a Q is equal to fixed cost plus TP divided by contribution per unit, right? The last one is the assumptions. Actually, we have discussed a couple of assumptions. Here they have mentioned only one. If you remember correct, we talk about there are only two cost types, that is fixed cost and variable cost. And then there's no learning curve effect. Whatever produced is going to be sold, right? And it's a short-term proposition. The pricing formula is not going to change. Sales mix is not going to change. There are 6 limitations, actually assumptions we learned. So in the presentation that you can find that. So here the examiner has given only one, but it's good that you mention all at least 3 or 4 sort of points, right? In presentation I have given 6, I suppose. So remember, try to remember at least 3 or 4. Any questions on this?
Sir, can you explain how to calculate the target profit, sir?
Yeah, target profit equation is like Q is equal to fixed cost plus TP divided by contribution per unit. So in that equation, what is Q? Is 20,000 is equal to what is the fixed cost? 5,000 plus TP we don't know, divided by contribution per unit 20, right? So using that equation, 20 is going to be multiplied with the 20,000 is 400,000 minus 5,000 will be the target profit. That's how the 395,000 is coming as an indirect method. The direct method the examiner has given, so you can compute sales, you can compute variable cost, you can compute fixed cost, but the fixed cost is given, then you will have the sales minus total cost will be the profit. This is the direct method the examiner has given. Right? This method is also correct. The our method is much easier because sometimes, since that you have done some other calculations, it's easy to just substitute and get the answer. Taruka, is it clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Right. You can do the both methods. So in given circumstances, see what is best for you and then do the computation. Right. Any other questions? Okay. Then we try to do a working capital question. I think this again we have we discussed in the class also, but since this is a very important type area, I just wanted to do it again, this one, right? See what the question is. Is the financial assistance given by whatever day-to-day operations known as the working capital, right? Working capital is important for whatever. So that's a general description. Then turnover is given 1.5. Cost percentages: raw material 30%, direct labor 25%, variable overheads 10%, fixed overhead 15%, S&D 5%. So basically, this is a forecasted project, because generally a client comes to you and wanted to start a project, and then he says, my working capital requirement is based on this turnover of this much and the cost as per maybe the industry, as per my research. So this is other cost percentages, right? Raw material, direct labor, variable, fixed overhead, and so on and so forth. Fine. Then we go, they ask about further question. They ask about, for the company on average, debtors take 2.5, raw materials 3 months, WIP. So this is also another set of information. Then this is about credit periods we given when you get the products whatever raw material and other expenses, then how you are going to pay, whether you are going to immediately pay with some credit period. So this is the credit period taken as follows. That's raw material, direct labor, variable overheads, fixed overhead, selling and distribution, right? These are sort of the credit periods also given, right? In addition, they say WIP, finished goods are valued at cost, and number of weeks 50. This is something new. Normally we say 52 weeks, but here they have given a 50 as a 50 weeks as per the annum. So these are the information that we have been given. So for the interest of time, so we together we will do the question. Now the first question they are asking is compute the cost incurred on raw material, direct labor, variable and fixed overhead and selling and distribution. These are the 5 areas, right? We have been asked to compute. Each area will get 1 mark, right? So now we asked to compute the cost of the raw material. How we are going to do the cost of the raw material? Now see, we have been given the turnover is given, right? And then cost percentage also been given here. Turnover for annum is 1.5, and then raw material cost is a percentage of turnover. It's a 30% kilo dila thiyena. So then what should be the answer? Turnover into percentage portion relevant to raw material. 1.5 into 30%. That's how the 450,000 is coming. Anybody is not clear on that? I think we have done this in the class, if I remember correct, but I wanted to, recap, because this type of questions also generally come. Last week we did the kind of operating cycle, cash cycle. That's about existing business. Then it's easy, right? Stock turnover period, debtors turnover period, creditors turnover period. It is easy because it's a existing business, and you get the sort of data. This is basically something new. Future business, a projected business. Anybody has any difficulty in understanding this? Right. If you're fine, so we go to the next one. Then direct labor. So direct labor also there is a 25%. 1.5 into 25%. So straight away 375. Variable overhead, fixed overhead, selling and distribution. So everything has been given, because now what you need to know is, so this type of question can be repeated. So maybe it is in the MCQ also. Just go through the information given very properly and see what is relevant. Now part 1, 5 marks, 5 calculations. We have been asked to compute each cost component. So when you see the question, it says turnover is 1.5, cost percentages has been whatever, 30, 25, 10, 15, 5. Then what you could do is compute the cost incurred on each item. Raw material, direct labor, variable overheads, fixed overheads, S&D. Percentages being given. Turnover also is there. We just multiply each of the items and you get the answers. Hope it's clear. Any questions? Right. Then part 2, we have been asked to compute what? Average value of the current assets. Current assets. First place, we need to know what is current assets. Current assets generally stocks and debtors. But here stocks has been classified into 3. Raw material, WIP, finished goods. Plus debtors is the last one. That's what the current assets equal. Then we need to compute what is raw material cost. Now, raw material they say how much? For the company, on average, if you go to the question, A says debtor take 2.5 months of the payments. Raw materials are stocked for 3 months. So they say raw material is a 3-month stock. එතකොට මේ 3-month stock එක එන්නේ මොකෙන්ද? Total material requirement එකෙන් 3 months තමයි raw material තියාගන්න යන්නේ. Do you know the total raw material cost? Yes. We calculated there 450. Right? We calculated total raw material cost is 450 here. Right. Then again 3-month stock. Now remember, when you say 3 months, generally now 3 divided by 12 we get the answer. But here they have mentioned 50-week year. Then how many number of days per annum? 50 into 7. So that's why the 350 ending. 12 months ki ekama tamai 350 days ki ending. That's fine. Then we need to know what is 3 months scale. What is 3 months then? So the 3 months is coming as 87.5 days, not the 90 days. Why? Because we say the 3 months is only 12 weeks kind of thing. Because 50 weeks per year, so then total years is 350. If it is a 360, 3 months is 90. It's a 350, 3 months is 87.5. ඒක තමයි මෙතන තියෙන trick එක. Right? If we have not been told anything about number of weeks per year, then we take number of days 360 or 365. When you say 3 months, just we take 90 or 3 divided by 12. That's it. ඒක තේරුණාද බලන්න? This how this 87 divided by 350 comes. Bit of mathematical this thing. I don't know how reasonable to give that type of level of computation to this, but anyway, it has been given now, so we need to follow. In case if it is given again, be careful about the terminology, the basis of information, right? Because it's a 50 weeks, then you have to convert the 50 into number of days and 3 months into also number of days in line with 350 days per year. එතකොට මෙතන දැන් ඇත්තටම how they have computed 360 into 350 divided by 360 into 90 කියන එක තමයි 87.5 අවිල්ල තියෙන අනිත් පැත්තෙන් කිව්වා. Right? So but normally 3 months is 90 days. Normally number of days is say 365 කියලා හිතන්න. So 390 divided by 360 or 365 into 350 will be the 87.5. So that is the computation we need. And if it's a 1 month, 87.5 divided by 3, something about 29 or so. ඒකයි මේ වෙන තැන්වල 29 කියලා 1 month requirement එකට එන්නේ. It's a 2 weeks, it's something 14.5 days also. If it is a 2 months, 58 days. It's a 3 months, it's 87 or 87.5. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. කාට හරි එක තේරුම් නැති අය ඉන්නවද? මොකද එකම කරේ අවුරුද්දේ දවස් ගාන 350 කියන එක අරගෙන ඒකෙන් මාස 3ක් කියන්නේ මොකද්ද? ඒකෙන් දවස් 90ක් කියන්නේ මොකද්ද කියන එක බලාගෙන තමයි මේ අපි මේ හඳුවේ. Right? එතකොට raw material cost is basically 87 point divided by 350 into 450. So get 112,500. That's not a big deal if we are able to get to know exact number of data. Then work in progress, again the same, but a bit of a thing to understand how you're going to compute. Equation is, if you remember correct, raw material plus 50% of operational expenses. That is the equation you need to remember. We have learned that also. Operational expenses are, what are the operational expenses? Now, raw material we have taken, then operational expenses is basically directly involving to the production. So here, what are those? That is direct labor and the direct variable. The variable overheads and the labor. ඒක තමයි direct labor and variable overheads කියලා තියෙන්නේ, directly involved in the production process. 50% of the operational cost plus the raw material is the total annum requirement. ඒකෙන් මාස දෙකක් කියන එක තමයි මේ ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන 58 divided by 350. Right? Work in progress is basically raw material plus 50% of operational expenses. Raw material plus 50% of operational expenses is basically the WIP for annum. But here they say WIP is basically represent 2 months. Under point C it says work in progress for manufacturing represent 2 months. Now when you say raw material, let's say 3 months. But in raw material, total is 450 per annum. We have calculated. 3 months තමයි අපි මේ ගත්තේ 87.5 divided by 350. WIP is 2.5 months. Sorry, 2 months. 2 months is 58 divided by 350. මේක ඇත්තටම equal balance එකක් තමයි 60 divided by 360 කියන එකේ එක තමයි 50ට බෙදීම 350 කියලා කියන්නේ. ඒක තේරුණාද බලන්න? If you get the equation correct, then the rest is straightforward. Only thing is we need to remember when come to the WIP, we take raw material 100% and 50% of operational expenses. ඊට පස්සේ we say 2 months, 1 month, 14 days, and then rest will be the estimated requirement. Any questions? Right. Then third one, finished goods. Finished goods basically raw material and all expenses up to S&D. Right? Direct labor. So raw material, direct labor, variable, fixed overheads. Everything is coming under the finished goods except S&D. Why? Selling and distribution is happening after finished goods. In terms of arriving debtors, yes, you can take the S&D, but not for the finished goods. So all estimated expenses up to making goods as finished nature will adapt each other and then take a 1 month requirement. 450, 375, 150, 225 into 1 month requirement is 29 divided by 350. Right? So that's how the finished goods comes. So now we computed raw material, WIP, finished goods. Then debtors, they say 2.5 months for the payment. Straight away given, we know total sales selling 2.5 months. So 2.5 months is 72.5 divided by 350. If we know all four, then we can compute the current assets. What I wanted to tell you, what I wanted to do this question second time also is to aware you there is a probability the examiner could give this type of questions also. Now when you see this, there may be a good time, or I mean bigger time that you need to involve here. So you should be very much thorough on the equation, on the computation. මොකද මේ ඔක්කොම කරාම ලකුණු 5යි අපිට හම්බෙන්නේ. If something goes wrong, then it deduct 1 mark or maybe 0.5 marks. So maybe final answer also not correct, but rest we could be okay, then you can get some marks. But that's why I'm telling, sometimes mathematical questions you can't take at question 1, so you can attempt these questions halfway through. That gives a much freedom to your thinking, less pressure, less stress, you can continue doing. Any questions on this? කාටද තේරුම් නැති කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවද? මොකද තේරුම් නැත්තේ?
So can you repeat the formula for finished goods?
Yeah, finished goods formula is raw material, direct labor, direct variable and fixed cost, fixed cost, overhead. 4 items are coming because it means that all these 4 items are required to bring raw material up until to finished goods. Thereafter, you need selling and distribution to make them sold, and then debtor involvement will be after that. So generally finished goods is whatever raw material to all other operational and fixed overheads. Everything add up, and then we take annual requirement. When you see raw material computation, only raw material are taking place. When you could finish work in progress, raw material plus 50% of operational expenses. When you see operational expenses, only direct expenses are coming through, adding together. No fixed overheads are taken into account because it is not relevant in the raw material stage. Rachin, is it clear enough?
I'm doubted with the work in progress.
I didn't get.
Work in progress, why are we taking 50? That
50%
number of...
is, that's a norm of the equation. Again, we assume because it is not 100% completed. It is not raw material. It's not neither finished goods. It's in between.
Why this is multiplied by this number of days, 50 divided by 350?
58 is because here it is given work in progress is for the 2 months requirement. Raw material requirement is 3 months. WIP is 2 months. Finished goods is 1 month. That's why we take 29. Debtors we take 2.5 months. It is given under 3rd point. So that's why we take them. Otherwise, it's the per annum requirement. Or raw material plus 50% of operational expenses per annum requirement for WIP. If you are keeping a annum 12 months, තියාගත්තොත් ඒක තමයි requirement. නමුත් මේගොල්ලෝ කියනවා requirement is 2 months. Requirement is 2.5 months. Requirement is 1 month. ඒ කිව්වහම අපි දැන් අවුරුද්දකට මෙච්චර නම් මාසෙකට කොච්චරද? මාස දෙකමාරට කොච්චරද දාලා තමයි මේ working capital. This is the estimation. We think we need raw material to have 2.5 months requirement is our raw material. 3 months is our finished good RM. WIP is 2.5. Finished goods is 1 month requirement කියලා අපි estimate කරනවා. So based on that estimate, we compute our current assets here. Any other question? Right. So then the rest of the questions we can also discuss. That is, they ask about current liability. Generally, current liabilities is something. Here again, they mention about creditor requirement. They say creditor, raw material they keep 2 months, direct labor for 1 week, variable overheads for 1 month, fixed overhead for 1 month, S&D they say half a month. එතකොට ඒක මෙහෙම දීලා තියෙනවා ඒගොල්ලෝ. Creditor requirements. We know what is raw material, we know what is direct labor, we know what is variable overhead, we know what is fixed overhead. S&D අපි question 1 එකේ compute කරා. Just apply this number of days. 2 months, 1 week, 1 month, 1 month, 2 weeks. Then you get that answer, current liability. See that you get it clear? Any areas of further clearance? Everybody is okay? Padmendra, Taruka?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Samindri, hope you are okay. Then the last one is basically, since we compute current assets, since we compute current liabilities, they ask about working capital. So assets minus liabilities. And some of the assumptions that we have taken, we have considered here. Right? This is something, data calculated on sales value, because example is generally data is being calculated on credit sales. Here that we are unable to, extract what is credit sales, so we take sales value and we did the data calculation. Fixed overheads are not considered as part of operational cost. So that's what we have taken, because sometimes in addition to variable cost, part of the fixed cost also could be as operational cost. But here we have not taken into account. So that's why in WIP calculation, we take only operational cost, that is direct labor and direct variable, not the fixed cost. That's also our assumption. Okay, these are some of the assumptions that we have taken into account when computing the working capital requirement, current assets minus current liabilities. Right. Then we move to the discussion. Right, I think we have done this kind of thing also. Take a couple of minutes with you and then see whether you can compute this payback, and then NPV, at least sketch it whether you can compute this. I think we have done this in the class, but just for the recap, see whether you can do it. Okay, take a couple of minutes and start doing. Right. We may have actually done it, but just see whether you can recap. What's the payback period? And then the difference between payback and the break even, that we can discuss later. Then NPV at a discount rate of 18. Then IRR of the project. So take one by one, and whoever who has computed, just let us know what's a payback period. Yeah, Taruka, 3 years, probably, I think that's correct. See with others also getting that. Then you can proceed with the NPV. In a couple of minutes, we will discuss the answer. Yeah, actually 2.4 years, probably, yeah. That is correct, I think, to the point you have computed. So see whether that you all getting that. If you want a further clarification on the payback. Hope everybody got that. Payback. Any question? 2.4 is exactly correct. 3 is also correct. Then what's the difference between the payback and the break even? So generally break even, we can see the answer is something neither profit nor loss situation. Payback is where you try to recover your investment, right? So that's a two way of interpretation of two supporting financial methods, right? So that we will discuss. Then go to the third one. NPV, if the discount rate is 18%. Since we have not been given the discounting factors, we need to find out the discounting factors at 18%. Equation is 1 divided by 1 plus r to the power n, right? 1 divided by 1 plus r is interest rate 18, close bracket, n is 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4 number of years. So year 0 we have n is 0, year 1 you have n is 1, like that. So probably you will have the number of discounting factors for respective years. See whether you can compute that also. And if anybody having the question, please let me know. We can see the answer a bit later, but just to recap and familiarize, so we need to do this. Any issue on computation? 215. I think that's almost correct. What about others? Anybody got the answer to that level? Any difficulty in computing? Padmendra, Rachini, any issue? Any issue?
No, sir.
Right. If it's a timing factor, I don't mind. But if you do have any technical issue, let me know. Right. So this is basically how they have computed the payback. So initial investment is something 830. So that 740 is recovered in the end of second year, 205 in the end of third year. So then the payback is 3 years or exactly 2.4 years. That also you can compute. Right. Either maybe you could compute it in a number of years also, or maybe exactly the point like 2.4 months or kind of, right? So hope that this don't have any issue. Anybody having an issue on computing the payback? කාටද ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවද payback එක කොහොමද compute කරන්න කියලා? Rachini, I think you have done it. Samindri, Aruka, you have done it. What about Prashant and Shashika? Padmant, I think you are okay with this. Right. Then break even and the payback. So again, they have mentioned about break even is the production point where total cost is equal to income. No profit, no loss situation. Then payback period is time taken to recover the capital invested in the project from the income generated from the project. So that is again is a time taken to recover the capital investment in the project from income generated from the project. So that's about how you recover the capital over a period of time is the payback, and the no loss, no profit situation or where income is equal to cost situation is the break-even point. That's very simple. Just you give definition, you can get the marks there. Then third one, now since we have not been given the discounting factor, it's up to us to compute the discounting factors. So that we need this equation, 1 divided by 1 plus r to the power n. N is number of years from 0 to 4. Then 8r is the interest rate. So here the present value is basically 1 divided by 1 plus r. When n is 1, you get this, n is 2, you get this, like that. So it is continuing. Then if we know the present value factors, then it's not a big deal just to substitute those things. So here, if you take year 1, this is the cash inflows, right? Year 2, year 3, year 4, this is the final year cash flows 90, then total cash inflows is like this. Then present value factor is the discounting factor for the each year. So multiply with that, then present value of future cash flows is 1 billion or so. Then initial investment is 830, that's a year 0. Then the difference is the NPV. That's how it basically computes. The learning points here is we need to know what is cash inflows and outflows, and then what is the net cash flow. Then if not given, we need to compute the discounting factors. Right? How we are going to compute? The equation is 1 divided by 1 plus r to the power n. N is from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4 years. R is the interest rate. So for each year, we can compute that. When you know the discounting factors, so we can multiply the net cash flow with the discounting factor for each year, we'll end up with present value of that particular year's cash flows, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Then present value of the cash flows is 1 billion or so. Then initially, there is 830 million going out. This is coming in. So the difference is the NPV. If it is positive, we say it's a good project. It's negative, we say we are not going to accept the project. Right. Any question on this computation? Please let me know. Any question? You are clear on that? Taruka, Padmendra, Priyashanta, Chandi?
Yes, sir.
Fine. Right. What about Rachini, Samindri?
Okay, sir.
Fine, thank you. So then we move to the last one. We have been asked to compute IRR. So at 18%, we have one positive NPV. Then what we need to do is we need to find another interest rate where we get a negative NPV, right? So we get positive NPV and relevant interest rates. So we need to get a negative NPV with a relevant interest rate. Fine. So how we're going to do that is basically we just assume another maybe interest rate. So something about say here he has taken a 31% also, or maybe 18%. You can take 35% also. Here actually he has done 29% and 31 also another sort of calculation, but we need not to do it again. Since that we have 18%, we can straight away assume something 35% also and do the computation. So suppose you do at 31%, so end up with minus 18 NPV. There again, at year 0, 830 going out, and year 1, 2, 3, 4, you have some incoming cash flows where you end up with 18%, 18 million at 31% discounting factor, right? So then what happens is, when you know two discounting factors, we apply this equation. R1, the lower discount rate, it's 18%. R2, high discount rate, here 31. NPV1 is NPV at 18%. NPV2, NPV at 31%, 18% and 31. So just you apply those things here. So here actually he has done is he has redone at 29% and 31%, and he has arrived at 30%. So we need not to do another 29% also, since we have 18% as a low interest rate. So we can assume 35% is another interest rate where we get a negative NPV. එහෙම තමයි මේ අපි හදලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට when you get all those things, just apply into this equation. IRR is equal to R1 plus NPV1 into R2 R1. So interest rate differential divided by NPV1 minus NPV2. So NPV difference, or either absolute values of NPV1 and NPV2. එහෙම ගත්තත් හරි එකෙන් දෙක අඩු කරත් negative positive වෙලා you can get that answer. So this is basically the IRR of the project. Now right. එච්චරයි. ඒකේ බලන්න මොකක් හරි තේරෙන්නේ නැති කොටසක් තියෙනවද කියලා. You can do some more questions at home with these numbers, with the questions, and but just you get the concepts. Now what is payback, what is NPV, how to compute NPV, how to compute IRR. If discounting factor is given, how we can do. If the discounting factor is not given, what we can do. In case of IRR, we need two NPVs, one positive, one negative, because the equation we need two NPV and two relevant interest rates. So one we have been already computed. Then we assume something double to that. 18 na this higher. So there's a chance that obviously it get negative. You can assume 25 and see it's positive, 28 positive, 30 it's something near zero. Just assume something 18 okay, double assume interest rate there. So then you get something a negative interest rate at the end. Any question? Okay, let's move on then. This is again important because I just wanted to go through this quickly. Why is where in most of the times we also get questions from rehabilitation, follow-up, recovery, right? Sick businesses, right? So we get some questions. So 2019 March also we have got it, because in given circumstances in today's context also, we see some of sort of requirements, like some of what you call requirements as to see about recovery, rehabilitation portfolio. So hence that you can do a couple of questions, but I just wanted to, give some idea on what type of questions that he can put us, right? Yeah, even since we have learned it a lot in the session also, but better you do some past paper questions where then it's more focused. So in this case, he asked about definition of the SIG project and attributes. What are the features? Have you, see a kind of a SIG project? If you remember, we have done about, the balance sheet of the SIG project also. So you can take some of those things into here when answering. Then reschedulement is a remedy that we can provide. Then what are the common changes we do at a reschedulement agreement? Normally we give a client agreement, and if client wanted to redress whatever the situation, then we offer reschedulement. So then it's something new what we try to do. Then what are the things you do differently? Third one, strategic restructuring. What do you mean by the strategic restructuring, and what are the 5 such strategies? Then main sources of early warning. So if you remember, we have done 5 early warnings signal signs. So he asked about what are the main sources. There are 5 things that he's asking. So very straightforward question, but if you have not done something previously, so probably you might not be able to attempt it at the first instance. So let's see what type of answer the examiner has been given. Okay? This is the definition and the attributes. Just read it and try to understand. Give me a minute again. Generally, SIG project is, I think we also have defined it, where it does not, if the project is not adequately generating internal surpluses on continuous basis, then we say it's a SIG, because there are some inflows, outflows. If you say inflows are not higher than the outflows, continuous basis, it's a loss making. Loan give interest give, so that's the situation. And always, trying to seek the support from outsiders. External support that is a SIG project in more qualitatively. Further, making about how we are going to define the NPL, yes, that's a different thing. Remember how we classify NPL, how you reclassify, how you treat the restructured credit. So we have learned that. Here he has asked only the SIG project definitions. So we have given, if you ask about the NPL, then that you can say 90 days over and above limits, 2-month installment due. So like that, that's another perspective. So sometimes he can ask that also. We have learned it in the class, but go through it and be very much, thorough on that. Then attributes, features, right? So what are the like symptoms, right? In the SIG project is like unable to pay debts. Company liabilities greater than assets, right? So you have to pay more, but assets are less. Negative net worth. Income coming down. Production cost going up. Short-term excesses, TODs are increasing. Debt service not satisfactory. Some delays happening. These are some of the things that you can see in terms of SIG project. So basically he asked, first question is the definition. Second one is the attributes. How you see this. Okay, that's the 5 marks first question. Then part 2. This is what generally we do in terms of reschedulement, right? In the reschedulement, right, you provide the original agreement to client to repay, and after some time, you see that the client is not in a position to pay the debts. Hence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reschedule it. Some concessions to be offered. So in a reschedulement, what I'm trying to do is basically mentioned here. Rate could be lower than the original rate, assuming that he might not be able to service at that rate. Tenor could be extended. Further grace period. Interest could be capitalized. Covenant sometime relaxed or revisited. Additional collateral. So are some of the things. This is very practically what we do. Credit card it's not a big deal for you, but if it is totally new, then it's good to know what we are trying to do at a reschedulement. Basically, we try to offer a revised concessions to the client who is in a difficulty to repay, who is in a sick in terms of performance, who is in NPL, in other words, more technically. So these are the things that what we could do. Any question on that?
So what's the difference between reschedulement and restructuring?
Sorry, on that. So restructure, reschedulement, generally technical definition is like in reschedulement, we say we are only changing the schedule, right? Like we only, we are not touching about the other factors in terms and conditions, but only extending the tenor. That's a reschedule. Right? Schedule is we are revisiting. But on the other hand, restructure, we try to do everything. That's a more formal definition, but in Sri Lankan context, we commonly use restructure, reschedulement, rehabilitation as one common word. When we say reschedule, it's again some part of the restructure also there, right? So, but with very technically, restructure is we all are restructuring all terms and conditions. Reschedule, we try to amend the schedule only. But in practical perspective, when you say reschedule, it's something, another restructure that we are speaking of. So that's why here when you say reschedule, so we try to do other factors also, not only the tenor. If you go by the tenor only, it's part 2 here. But all the other are not reschedule terms. But generally we do in terms of a client asking a reschedule. Commonly පාවිච්චි කරන වචනයක් හැටියට තමයි reschedulement එක restructure එකයි යන්නේ. But when it comes to the strategic restructuring, it is a different approach. That's a part 3. Where again we try to give support to the client, not only the reschedulement, like revisiting condition and all that. That's a part of the restructuring. In addition, we try to do several other things also, like to support the client to come out of the situation. What are those? Closing down on a plant or stop production one product without compromising the main cost of business. Let's say if you have say 3 lines of machines, for example. Now what you're trying to do is like say 2 machines will be continued, 1 machine line will not be started, or maybe closed down, or maybe sold off, and get that income to run the other businesses. Divestiture. So part of the business can be sold. Part of the business could be sold to some other. Maybe you can bring down the investor, or maybe let's say you have 3 products lines, so 1 product could be sold to somebody else. Rent any additional production capacity. So there may be chances where you can rent out some of the premises, you can get some income. Lay off additional staff. Then a contract in daily pay karana egolo නැති වෙන්න පුළුවන්. Because you have, in a bit of difficult situation. So you have to scale down your operations. consolidation of operation into one location, like rather than running several same activities in different location, accounts එක centralize කර, kitchen එක centralize කර, maybe production centralize කර, the others are outlets and you do a central distribution. Adopt new marketing to improve the sales rather than you just, let's say, asking client come and get the sort of the products bought. What you could do is maybe through online, through I think something has happened. Could you hear me again?
Yes, sir.
Rachini, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So then the restructure of the organization with the new management is something where new management, new blood to the organization, because maybe existing may not be competent enough, may not be adequate, or sometimes you invite with the consent of the borrower, maybe new management with the new skills. Okay. Find the investor who could inject capital. So new investors you will bring, and then so they can do more sort of support, merge with a similar business, because like banks trying to merge, like, so you can say merge with another similar business. So then has a better focus and better chance of doing business. Liquidate the business and pay the debt. So like under the strategic restructuring, so I mean, if everything is not going to work, then what you can do, you have to liquidate it, because rather than waiting for some more time, which have more debts and everything could come, so you liquidate and pay the debts. So that's what generally we do. Okay. Last part is basically main source of early warnings. That's again, we have learned it also. These are the 5 things we learned. If you remember correct, accounts to credit type of thing, financial statement, site visit, information from data supply and services, informal and other public information. It's basically, so we have discussed 5 early warning sources. And again, he could ask on not only that 5. So within that, he can, give us a feedback saying, where try to describe, say, one or two early warning signals, like deposit to account and loan accounts, or maybe accounts maintained by the client, is maybe the very high level early warning. And within that, so we have listed at least 10-15 features: OD, loan repayment delay, bank guarantee recall. So like that, there are so many things we learn. So sometimes the examiner could ask that from you. Again, then මේ පහ අහලා describe කරන්න කියලා පුළුවන් එකක්. Then you need to learn that also, right? So what I wanted to tell here is, because this is again very easy question, but only thing is timely and important also, because there is a highly likelihood that we get a question on this area. So what you could do is, I mean, try to select few more questions. I think I had in 2018 March also, go through it and have a better answer while you going through our presentation. ඒක අපි හදාගත්තනේ මොනවද early warnings කියන්නේ, ඒක ඇතුලේ තියෙන්නේ මොනවද, how you going to define NPL, how you classify, how you reclassify, what the restructured reclassify, and what are the the recovery methods, what are the legal methods, right? What do you mean strategic restructuring, what is reschedulement, what are the features of reschedulement, right? So I mean, so many things we can learn. I mean, so many information. හැම එකක්ම අපිට important. If you see this, the first question, I mean, not easy, but if you have studied well, it's not a big deal to answer, right? 18 March, actually, I'm not going to do, but you can do it here. Consequences of industrial sicknesses, right? Because it's very straightforward, but read through this, because this could be repeated, right? This is the sources of signal that we have learn, right? Account, financial statement, site visit. මේ අර ඊට පස්සේ අවුරුද්දට ගන්නෙත් මේකයි. early warning signal එකම තමයි එයා අහනවා. And again, we go the line by line under each. This is the CBSL definition. I told you, so sometimes the examiner would ask about what is NPA, and NPA definition is given here because it could be come to the first questions or under MCQ or maybe the part 2 because I have given it since it has been asked again. That's about what you can do, right? About like earlier he has asked about reschedulement techniques. Here that you have been asked the same in different way, right? Because interest capitalization, rescheduling, interest rebate, additional financing, increasing the allowing grace period, increasing tenor, revisiting interest rate, additional collateral. So so same type of questions, but you need to know. Finally, just brief it, but not going to in detail explain here. Now, first time, the examiner asked about SOT pestle tools, right? So what is SOT? What is pestle? What's the difference between SOT and pestle, right? So explain the SOT, right? Why the pestle is important, right? So the same question could be come again because it's the first time for the last 12 or 13 occasions he has introduced this question. 2018 September, so thereafter he didn't ask, but there is a highly likelihood there is a repeat of this type of a question. But remember, in addition to this, go through on the Porter's 5 forces model. That also have checked in somewhere else. What is Porter's 5 forces model, elements of the Porter's 5 forces model, and the description to that extent. He has not asked to ask a question like maybe take example and apply the pestle or SOT has not been asked. I also think that type of questions will be for us, but this could be a question that we need to expect, right? So I think again that I am not going to discuss this, that you can go through because I just wanted to give this have a more focus. So මේ දාලා තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න වලින් ආපහු අපිට ප්‍රශ්න එන්න පුළුවන් හින්දා තමයි මම මේ වැඩිපුර මේ ටික ගත්තේ. Right. So generally what I want to tell you is now what we have done so far is basically we have covered like maybe 60 to 70% of the areas where the examiner could give questions to us. So the next week what I'm planning to do is we try to do some MCQ questions. So which helps us to see that overall feeling of the examiner in terms of examination questions. So with that, I think we are going to wind up our classes possibly by next week. So we try to do that. Then last point from me is now since that we have 2 months to go for exam probably in January, then take papers from last year to at least 6 or 7 backwards and cluster the question. Now you see what we have done, some clustering, maybe SME, maybe introduction, maybe project financing, maybe financial, working capital, break even, project financial, like that. So there may be cluster of the questions that he generally asks. So take a cluster and put all questions there, and then select at least 1 or 2 good questions. Go through, write 1 question completely and get familiarized. Finally, go to the MCQs. If possible, you can try to do all last 12 to 13 papers MCQs. Just nothing. And just read the question, answer. Question, answer. I mean, not take much time of So then, it is very easy in case, like if you take 10 into say 12 or 13 sessions, 130 questions you have gone through. So at least there is a very much likelihood at least 2 or 3 questions could be repeated in the same way or in a different way. එතකොට අනිවාර්යෙන් question දෙකක් තුනක් එනවා කියලා කියන්නේ you can score about 6 marks. I think it's a very good to start with. But the 45 is our initial target now. So try to do that also. I think having said that, that's my plan. So even beyond that, what I will do is, I'll share my numbers and contacts and everything so that you can, once you start really, you can, contact me if you do have any question on the past papers and all that. So any questions from you end? Okay, so then thank you for joining me, and try to start some initial work on the the papers, because most of other lecturers also now is going to wind up their sessions maybe by next week or so. There are revision classes being going to start, but as I told you on the other day, no need you to come for my revision classes. Basically, I'm trying to do the same thing with maybe additional bit of maybe theory, because it's a 9-hour program. So probably I might do some more theory, not all the questions at once. So that's what my plan, but you need not to come for that. But I think what you could do is like be on next week that I will share my numbers and contact, so that you can straight away contact me if required when you are attempting the past papers, or what we have done, or where you are going to do on the last previous questions. So having said that, I'm going to wind it up for today, and thank you so much for joining me, and stay safe and nice week ahead. Right, take care, guys.